Hello, everyone. I'm Carrie, and I made a slideshow about FBAs and BIPs. So, what is a BIP? It's a behavior intervention plan. This is a plan that's put into place to try to decrease and then eventually replace an undesirable behavior. So, it can be something like work refusal, aggression, disrupting the class, all of those things that detract from the student's learning. Before you implement and develop a BIP, you have to do an FBA, so a functional behavior assessment. This is done typically by a BCBA, so a behavior specialist or a school psychologist. They'll come in, they'll observe a student, they take data, and they are going to determine why the student is exhibiting this behavior. And that's all going to be presented to the team. It's important to remember that behavior is communication. So a person does everything on purpose. They might be attempting to solve a problem. Even if as an adult you don't see that there's a problem, they might perceive that there is a problem. And then you have to make sure or try to determine what the purpose of the behavior is. Why is the student doing what they're doing? This can be especially important for students who are nonverbal or who have limited verbal skills. Behavior occurs in patterns. So you'll want to look at the time of day that you'll see the target behavior. You want to look at, is this happening during transitions or times that we're changing the schedule? All of these things can help you determine the why, and that's going to be very important for trying to change and replace the behavior. So there are 10 common elements of an FBA. You'll have the student information, the target behavior that you're trying to replace. The antecedent is what happens before the behavior. The concurrent events is what's happening during the behavior. And then consequences is what's happening after the behavior. There'll also be observations. So the BCBA will come in, they'll observe the student in a typical environment where you'll see that target behavior. They'll also interview teachers, paraprofessionals who are in constant contact with the student. Maybe student records of discipline or health might be relevant, so those could be in there. Influencing factors, if there are any, family, environment, that will be evaluated and added. And then that hypothesis of the function. Why is the student doing what they're doing? And it could be as simple as it's attention seeking or they're avoiding work. An FBA is different from a comprehensive evaluation. An FBA is typically done for a student who already has a plan like a 504 or an IEP, and a comprehensive evaluation could be used to qualify a student for one of those plans. So an FBA can be part of a comprehensive evaluation, but they're not the same. Once you have the FBA, you can develop the plan. You can also put strategies into a 504 or an IEP, but if that doesn't work, the BIP is that next step. It's the next level. It's more than just an accommodation or a modification. And it outlines the target behavior and it tells you how you're going to replace the behavior and how you're going to take data to record it. So some of these are very similar to the FBA. So I'm going to talk about some of them right now, but not all of them because, like I said, there are similar components. So the target behavior was in the FBA, but it's also important to have the goals for how much you want to decrease the behavior. So you have to know how much the behavior occurs now and how much you're going to try to decrease the behavior. It's kind of like an IEP where you have a goal for the progress that you want your student to make. The interventions, what are you going to do to the antecedent or to the consequence to try to replace and change the behavior? And you'll also want to say what you're going to replace the target behavior with. There are interventions that are common. These are kind of like big categories. So you can change the physical environment, you can change routines and antecedents, change the consequences for behavior. Maybe you just have to change how the information is presented. And it could be that you have to explicitly teach appropriate behavior. I'm going to talk about some possible intervention strategies now, not all of them, but some that are easy to do, simple to understand, that teachers in any classroom could implement. So some instructional strategies are modeling desirable behavior. You can organize group discussions. Maybe you develop a literature-based lesson, and you can also just teach the student self-monitoring. Maybe you have to restructure that antecedent, what's leading up to the behavior. So it could be a distracting material, or maybe if they're struggling with transitions or changes, you have you have a discussion with them ahead of time where you prepare them for those changes that are going to happen. And you might see that something as simple as that is going to decrease the behavior. It's really important to know what you're going to do as a consequence or a reinforcement for the positive behavior, but also how you'll reduce the misbehavior. So, if you want to reinforce the good behavior, you can give them verbal praise, you can develop a point system or just tangible reinforcements for saying that they're doing what you want them to do. But then to reduce misbehavior, you want to look at what the function of the behavior is, and you want to make sure that you're not encouraging them to keep up that behavior or you're not giving them what they want. So if their function is attention seeking, if they're trying to get your attention, then you might have to ignore them. And maybe you have to give them a place where they can go and cool off, and then you discuss with them the behavior afterwards. But it's very important that this is outlined in the BIP, how you're going to reinforce, but also reduce the misbehavior. It could be environmental changes as well. So, if you're noticing that the antecedent is something to do with the environment, maybe if a student is having trouble and you see the target behavior from explaining their work in front of the class, maybe it's just a one on one discussion that has to happen instead of a group discussion. So, simple changes to environment, small group instead of whole class, or one on one instead of whole class can be something that is an environmental change. The person's responsible for implementing the BIP is also important. It has to be consistent across all classes. So teachers have to know what the interventions are, they have to know how to take the data, and they have to know how they should be reinforcing that positive behavior and the consequences for the misbehavior. Because people are taking data, there has to be timelines and review dates. You can't just take data and not look at it to see if it's working. So in the BIP, you're going to make sure that the BIP is being carried out, that data is being taken, and then you'll have different days that you go back and review to see, is this plan working, or do we have to go back and check what we've done and make some changes. This goes along with monitoring progress and evaluating as well. So maybe the BCBA collects things weekly or monthly. And if you're not seeing the progress being made towards your goals, maybe the BIP is not appropriate and maybe changes need to be made. So these two slides are really important because you can't just take data and make these changes and assume that things are working. You have to have the proof to back it up. So, can positive behavior supports like tangible reinforcements help all students? The answer is yes. And the positive behavior interventions and supports, PBIS, is something that's being adopted by whole schools now. So, it is a three-tiered system. There's an individual level, a classroom level, and then a whole school level. And it used to be something that was in RTI, but now it's being used for all school or the whole school. So this is a model. It's important to note that this can work for all students. So it doesn't have to be just a student with a BIP or a 504 or an IEP, but this works for all students who maybe are having trouble or maybe exhibit behaviors from time to time that are undesirable. So school-wide, you'll have a leadership team, they'll have meetings, they'll can figure out what they're going to do to encourage these students and reward them. But then individual students who have behavior plans, you can work their rewards, their tangible rewards into this system. So it kind of makes them not stand out as much from everybody else, and everybody's getting these rewards. But it's something that you can do and affect an individual student, but also your school-wide atmosphere and community. So it can be really effective in any grade level. We do it in the middle school. I've been in elementary schools where they do it. So it's really important. You also have to do professional development. Every staff member has to be able to implement the PBIS program. These are just my sources. Thanks for watching, and I hope you learned something about BIPs and FBAs.